Charles Taylor is a unique figure in Anglo-American intellectual life, and perhaps well beyond that, partly because of the breadth and originality of his work, and partly because the projects he undertakes do not fit neatly into specific field containers of academic life. Is he a historian? Not exactly, though there's a lot of history in his work. Does he offer explanations? Well, maybe, in a sense, but these explanations do not usually fit into the usual matrix of social science. In both Sources of the Self and A Secular Age, for instance, he gives us an overview of the intersubjective conditions in which contending beliefs and judgments are formed in late modern life. He does not exactly explain how modernity or secularism came into being, but his discussions of the alternative sources available for people to draw upon, and the way in which theistic belief has become more optional, not his best term, in secular societies, do help to set the context of explanation for them. Indeed, when you engage Taylor on the complexity of this intersubjective matrix, your notion of what an explanation looks like undergoes revision. Is he perhaps a metaphysician then? Well, yes, he is. But he teaches us how all cultural theories and interpretations are laden with metaphysical or ontological assumptions, even if and when they deny being so. His work thus challenges both the possibility of being post-metaphysical and the autonomy of metaphysics, both. Further, he advances a specific metaphysical perspective while refusing to pretend it has been proven, or even that no other is plausible. Dick Bernstein discussed that very well yesterday. He acknowledges and perhaps even celebrates the element of faith that resides in his own existential stance, without pretending that he or anyone can dispense with some such existential stance. So he encourages us to bridge that artificial dichotomy between philosophy and theology that still haunts the late modern academy. Is he a secularist? I'm giving all this answers, Chuck. Is he a secularist? Well, yes, in a sense, but it is a secularism that comes to terms with its partial dependence upon some theistic traditions, and one that also tries to show a variety of theists how they themselves link to a capacious secular tradition that it may be wise to save in some respects. So I count myself as an ally of Taylor, indeed indebted to him in these respects. I also agree with him that while an ontology, as I understand him, does not determine an ethics or a politics or an identity, there are complex relations between all of these dimensions, so that a move in any one of them leans on the others, encouraging some possibilities and discouraging others. That is why when Taylor addresses an issue, he finds it incumbent to move back and forth across the historical, ontological, existential, ethical, and linguistic scales in which it is set. Some of his books are long. That's a cheap joke, and I know it. As he moves up and down these scales, his method must be comparative if it is to locate hidden assumptions and tendencies in the tradition he himself imbibes. It is as if he thinks that coming to terms with comparative deficiencies and temptations in contending traditions, including his own, provides the most promising route to encouraging internal modesty within all of them, as you seek to open up modes of exchange between them. So when you hear critics say that Taylor does not explore non-Western cultures enough, it may be wise to suggest that they are both right and wrong. It's possible that he underplays the ways in which European developments were shocked by the New World and how its colonial adventures damaged that world, and then those things blew back to it. But still, to correct these limits, if they are limits, by continuing to apply the strength of the general intellectual strategy of Taylor would require a Herculean task for which not too many of us are prepared. It could not simply take the form of correcting the West against some intact tradition in the East or the other way around. Such global connections, global comparisons, underplay multiple minority reports and cross currents within all of these cultural traditions. That's, I think, part of Taylor's lessons. The wider enterprise to be pursued, then, would involve complex confessions on all sides of the temptations, ambiguities, and mysteries that haunt its dominant traditions. And to pursue such a trail without losing touch with minority reports that Taylor engages within the West, may require intellectuals of a breadth and courage within their own territories unusual in the world today. It may sometimes involve placing a minority report within Europe in conjunction with a minority report in some other zone or area of the world. The minority reports are usually the most promising ones. I find myself persuaded by Taylor on the themes listed above. He invests me with ambitions I'm certain to fall short in meeting. I'm particularly indebted to his idea that an ethic can involve the cultivation of opaque sources already circulating within and around you, even though in doing so, I seek to draw sustenance from a minority tradition of open immanence that Taylor himself squeezes too hard. I will not rehearse my partial dissent from Taylor's readings of non-theistic philosophies of immanence, though these issues could possibly peek through as we go through the next several pages. So let's take up today just one issue, and that is Taylor's definitions of fullness and wholeness, to see whether there is a case to be made to inflect them differently, not to reject them, but to inflect them differently. Here are a couple of formulations from the age of the secular. I'm behind. I haven't read the latest book. Somewhere in some activity or condition lies a fullness, a richness. That is, in that place, activity or condition, life is fuller, richer, deeper, more worthwhile, more admirable, more what it should be. This perhaps is a place of power. We often experience this as deeply moving, as inspiring. Perhaps this sense of fullness is something we just catch glimpses of from afar. We have that powerful intuition of what fullness would be like if we were in that condition. That's on page 5. The sense of orientation, another quote, the sense of orientation also has a negative slope, where we experience, above all, a distance, an absence, an exile, a seemingly irremediable incapacity ever to reach this place, an absence of power, a confusion, or worse, the conditions often described in the tradition as melancholy. As Taylor says, that's the end of the quote, as Taylor says, his description does seem to tilt toward the believer, that's a quote, leaning toward the idea that fullness is approached in life if and when grace becomes infused into it. But he then assures us that unbelievers can pursue such a condition too. And that's a great relief to me. Quote, the unbeliever wants to be the kind of person for whom this life is fully satisfying, end of quote. Too bad we find ourselves visiting therapists so often to compensate for the lack of an outside source for the reception of power, end of quote. But we unbelievers pursue multiple contending strategies to compensate for the lack of fullness, as the traditions of exclusive humanism, post-Nietzscheanism, hard secularism, and a couple of versions of postmodernism reveal. So, quite a category then, fullness. It may be worthwhile noting, and he knows this, that those who are unbelievers from Taylor's vantage point often adopt an alternative set of onto-beliefs of their own. We are indeed believers. Some of us believe positively, for example, in a cosmos of becoming set on multiple interacting tiers of chronotime, as we identify an outside to every specific human and non-human force field, an outside that periodically helps to set the stage for the creative evolution of a climate, an ocean conveyor system, a glacier flow, a species change, a civilization, a human life, and a new thought. The outside is multiple, active, and real to us. It is merely not divine to us. From such a perspective, Taylor's general definition of fullness as the goal of all traditions worries us a little, and perhaps only a little. But the rest of my paper is about that. We dissent from both the universality of its affirmative expressions and its twin brother in some versions of critical theory, where fullness remains the goal and a negative dialectic of failed transcendence is the persistent result, expected by the theorist, but not by the masses. We're kind of worried about both sides of that operation. So what is the version of transcendence? When I say we, I just mean me and a couple of friends. What is the version of transcendence Taylor favors then? It does not seem to be that Augustinianism in which an omnipotent, omniscient God monopolizes creative power. It is not lodged in the nominalist tradition of the late Middle Ages. It's not lodged in Calvinism. And the philosophers of failed transcendence seem too negative for him too, and I love him for that. My sense is that Taylor's faith has evolved rather far, but I'm going to speak on ground that I have no basis for speaking on. He seems to invoke a benevolent, somewhat limited God who does not punish us with devastating natural events, who calls upon us to draw closer to his love, and who provides a gratifying court of appeal and sustenance whenever the worst happens. A quote. This is from page 655. Quote, many who are relatively, you shouldn't laugh, you wrote the book, many who are, many who are relatively innocent are swept up in this suffering, and some of the worst offenders get off lightly. The proper response to this is not retrospective bookkeeping, but making ourselves capable of responding to God's initiative. End of quote. I can have an agonistic respect for that kind of faith. This is surely an insufficient rendering of Taylor's faith. What is noble within it, even as minimally summarized by me, is Taylor's recognition of its contestability and his acknowledgement that its living expression is often entwined with stringent, punitive Christian traditions that are difficult to disentangle definitively from it. Welcome to the United States. In this respect, Taylor is a noble warrior against dangerous tendencies in the tradition he himself imbibes. Doing so, he sets an example for those who imbibe the positivity of other traditions as we resist both the unfettered pursuit of fullness and the sufficiency of a negative dialectic. The theme I wish to pursue here is advanced by a set of thinkers who cut across theistic and non-theistic traditions. William James, Henri Bergson, Alfred North and Whitehead, Nietzsche and Deleuze, while breaking with each other on the issue of God, some of them have it, well, I won't talk about it, converge in projecting a rather open world of becoming that both exceeds and includes the human estate. They don't support the sufficiency of cultural internalism. They all also inflect, I think, Taylor's pursuit of human fullness toward an appreciation of human vitality. More sharply, they treat the vitality of being as a crucial element of the good life, even if it is also a dangerous element of the good life. Today, they would almost certainly emphasize the fragility of things for the human estate in both its intercivilizational relations and in its accelerated imbrications with a host of non-human force fields that themselves possess differential powers of self-organization and metamorphosis. The vitality of being. Let's follow Whitehead for just a moment as he calls upon us to accentuate our sense of belonging to the world by cultivating further the simmering sense of vitality already there to some degree. Shocked by the quantum revolution that uprooted Newtonianism, Whitehead extrapolated creatively from that tradition in a way that diverged, I think, from all of the other philosophers of his day. For him, creativity is an ultimate term. meaning I take it that you can point roughly to how it happens, but not delineate the process in more precise explanatory terms. Explanations are inherently open. It engenders elbow room in the cosmos, this creativity. It unfolds out of historical preconditions and on certain constraints and supports. The constraints and supports are explained in large part by the fact that the universe at any moment of chronotime is composed of actual entities of innumerable types, cultural and natural, which help to set preconditions for new events and entities. So it's a constrained creativity. The creative process is distributed in the cosmos, and it unfolds at key junctures in relations between entities, between constituencies, involving both the excesses that involve them and their interentanglements. I'm skipping 3 paragraphs here. And so I'll say this extremely brief summary is insufficient, of course, to the Whitehead corpus, but it may set the issue of human vitality and sporadic moments of creativity within and beyond the human state into a larger compass. Human vitality expresses our distinctive, modest, and periodic participation in larger processes of creative change, for good and for ill. How does human vitality find expression? It may be dimly experienced as the excess of life over a specific course of action actually taken, or as a stutter that bursts forth as you search for the appropriate word, not yet in your lexicon, for an unfolding thought that is on the way, or as you dwell occasionally in an uncanny experience of duration, in which pressures from a past incipience that never became consolidated as actual enter into subliminal exchanges with established habits in a changed setting, or as a jazz musician or point guard improvises in the middle of the ongoing action, or as participants in a burgeoning social movement allow a new strategy or relational conception of themselves to emerge as if from nowhere, from the pluripotentiality residing in their struggle. And good luck to the Montreal students in their demonstrations. The periodic experience of vitality, all right, we'll get that. Yeah, there's it, guys. Yeah. The periodic experience of vitality involves oscillations back and forth between a moment of accentuated imbalance and the temporary recovery of a new, rather precarious balance, sometimes set on a new plateau, a new thought, a new concept, a new strategy, a new degree of sensitivity or responsiveness. Such oscillations can sometimes even operate within a short compass. It's when you start a sentence and find it being adjusted and refined as it proceeds. In many cases, the end of that sentence was not simply implicit in its beginning. The implicit is attached, let us say, to the pursuit of fullness. I expect a reply to that. The incipient to the process of vitality. Spontaneous humor is connected to the pluripotentiality of incipient activity in this way. How such vital oscillations work in everyday life may be brought out by considering a person who has lost the fragile equipoise between a pluripotential train of thought on the way and periodic triggers that nudge it to become experimental. In Time Regained, the aging hero Marcel encounters Charlus again, the arrogant intellectual he had known as a young man. The proud Charlus, who now has aphasia, finds that those uncanny moments of imbalance, rebalance, I call vitality, have lost the element that make them so valuable and risky. And so here's the quote from Proust, and therefore it's obviously the best part of this paper. Of the two, one, the intellectual one, passed his time in complaining that he suffered from progressive aphasia, that he constantly pronounced one word or letter by mistake for another. But as soon as he actually made such a mistake, the other, de Charlus, the subconscious one, who was as desirous of admiration as the first was of pity and out of vanity, did things that the first would have despised, immediately, like a conductor whose orchestra had blundered, checked the phrase which he had started, and with infinite ingenuity made the end of his sentence follow coherently from the word which he had in fact uttered by mistake, end of quote. The second sentence by Proust consists of phrases that enact in their form the struggle between the two Charleuses. The poise that Charleuse has lost suggests what is involved in the vital play between imbalance and rebalancing when thinking is at its most lively. Poise admits that vitality is the difference between allowing creativity to be folded into thought on occasion without having willed it, and being the victim of odd triggers that merely disorient. Stutter and stammer as a word or phrase surfaces from a subliminal trigger, but not too much or too often. An excess of triggers overwhelms vitality, their absence freezes it. Vitality, then, may exceed fullness. It may be closer to the overfullness or abundance of life over identity that Nietzsche talks about in the gift-giving virtue. When you become newly sensitized to an unfamiliar inflow of experience, absorb it, and allow the energies and trajectory that emerge when it has digested itself to find positive expression. It takes two, at least two, within or without, within constituencies and without, to perform the dance of vitality. A theory that links agency to vitality, in which intrusions from the outside periodically become catalyzing events, is one in which the active, masterful image of the agent gives considerable ground to more opaque processes of self-organization that unfold within and between us. During such moments, you ascertain the outcome as it unfolds, rather than before it is enacted. Only now is it timely to decide what to do with the result. So vitality, agency, creativity, precariousness, and freedom are thus interinvolved terms in this lexicon. None dissolves entirely the element of mystery circulating through these dissonant connections. How could it, if vitality is sometimes bound to creativity? That is why the received traditions of negative and positive freedom in Anglo-American political thought may both need to be worked upon reflectively, the gift and the risk of vitality, and I'm fully aware that people were doing that and starting to do that today. But that's what I had written in my paper. But does fullness really contrast that much with vitality? Taylor, the generous philosopher of encompassment, may say no. Certainly, the latter has similar preconditions. To suffer grief or overwhelming loss or several other things drains vitality from life for constituencies, for individuals. And Taylor's earlier discussion in Sources of the Self of the ambiguity of sources, articulations, and changes in the web of intersubjectivity may draw the two notions closer together than I hear them being in the age of the secular. So we may have a difference of inflection here, amplified perhaps by different contestable consumptions of the cosmos in which we are set. I do suspect that part of the sense of belonging to the world is bound up with this experience within and between us of vitality. And so I'm going to close now. In my book, Charles Taylor and Alfred North Whitehead are two noble thinkers who care about the fragility of things. Each is worthy of the other. And I feel privileged to have imbibed the work of Charles Taylor over the last several decades, even though I try to disagree with him every chance I get. And I've known him for a while, but not as long as Dick Bernstein. Thank you very much.